The relentless hum of the highway tires had become a strangely comforting lullaby, a constant reminder of the miles I was putting between myself and the concrete jungle I called home. I'm Jalen Carter, and for the past few months, my life had been an unrelenting storm of spreadsheets, deadlines, and stakeholder meetings. A massive property development project had consumed every waking moment, demanding sacrifices from my personal life that felt bordering on unsustainable. Finally, the dust had settled, the champagne corks had popped, and the project was officially handed off, leaving me emotionally and physically depleted. The prescription was simple: escape. A solo road trip, no itinerary, no deadlines, just the open road, good music, and an unwavering pursuit of culinary delights. I envisioned myself discovering hidden gems, tucked-away diners brimming with local flavor, and roadside BBQ stands radiating the smoky promise of mouth-watering ribs. The reality, however, had been a series of predictable chain restaurants and questionable gas station snacks. That's why, when I saw the faded sign for a small-town diner shimmering in the afternoon heat, I felt a surge of genuine excitement. It was exactly the kind of place I was hoping to find, a quiet haven that looked like it had been plucked straight out of a time capsule. The town itself was a charming throwback, a collection of antique stores promising forgotten treasures and dusty gas stations whispering tales of bygone eras. This was precisely the antidote to the sterile modernism I had been drowning in. My stomach, having endured a steady diet of processed convenience foods, grumbled in anticipation as I pulled off the highway and into the diner's parking lot. The building itself was a classic example of mid-century architecture, the kind with a gleaming chrome exterior and a cheerful neon sign that proclaimed "open" in vibrant hues. A wave of nostalgia washed over me as I imagined the countless stories contained within those walls, the countless cups of coffee poured, and the countless conversations shared. It was around lunchtime, and I was ravenously hungry, craving something authentic, something real. As I walked through the diner's front door, the scent of sizzling bacon filled the air, a comforting aroma that instantly transported me back to childhood breakfasts with my family. The interior was exactly as I had hoped, a warm, inviting space with red vinyl booths, checkered tile floors, and vintage posters adorning the walls. Soft rock classics played from unseen speakers, providing a gentle soundtrack to the scene. The booths were about half full, a mix of locals and the occasional traveler seeking respite from the highway. I sank into a booth, relieved to finally be off my feet and ready to indulge in some well-deserved comfort food. I glanced around at the other patrons, noticing the friendly banter between the waitresses and the regulars, the easy camaraderie that only exists in small-town establishments. I felt a sense of contentment settle over me, a feeling of being exactly where I was supposed to be. Then she arrived. It was as if she materialized out of thin air, a stark contrast to the warm, welcoming atmosphere I had initially encountered. Karen. The name itself felt like a premonition, a warning of the unpleasantness that was about to unfold. Her appearance was a caricature, almost too perfect to be real. Short, meticulously styled blonde bob, a pink polo shirt stretched taut across her frame, and an air of self-importance that radiated outwards like a palpable force field. But it was the name tag that truly sealed the deal. Manager, Karen W., as if she wanted to ensure that everyone was fully aware of her position of authority. She approached my booth with a deliberate stride, not a hint of a smile on her face, her gaze fixed on me with an almost accusatory intensity. She didn't bother. With a greeting, no polite hello, no friendly inquiry about my day. Instead, she subjected me to a slow, deliberate once-over, her eyes scanning me from head to toe, as if I had committed some egregious offense simply by walking through the door. The look she gave me was one of undisguised disapproval, a clear indication that I was not welcome in her establishment. Then she spoke, her voice laced with a condescending tone that sent a shiver down my spine. "The kitchen is closed for maintenance," she announced, her words clipped and dismissive. I blinked, momentarily taken aback. It was 12:47 p.m., the peak of lunchtime. Diner kitchens don't typically close for maintenance during the busiest hour of the day. I glanced around the room, noticing that other patrons were actively being served. A man in the booth next to me was happily devouring a burger and sipping on a thick milkshake, completely oblivious to the fact that the kitchen was supposedly closed. I politely inquired whether the closure was temporary, perhaps a brief interruption for a minor repair. "Just wondering when you might be opening the kitchen again," I asked, keeping my tone neutral and respectful. Karen leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that carried just enough to be heard by the surrounding patrons. "We don't serve outsiders without reservations," she declared. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. The absurdity of the statement hit me like a wave. Reservations? In a small-town diner? With a glowing neon open sign beckoning customers from the highway? The blatant hypocrisy was almost comical. I struggled to maintain my composure, determined not to escalate the situation. "I just need a sandwich, a soda, anything really," I pleaded, hoping to appeal to her sense of basic human decency. Karen rolled her eyes, a clear indication that my request was an imposition. "We're out of bread, out of meat, and out of patience," she snapped, her voice rising in volume. "I suggest you try that gas station down the road." The other patrons in the diner were now openly eavesdropping, their faces a mixture of discomfort and morbid curiosity. They pretended not to hear, but they heard everything. I felt a surge of anger rising within me, but I fought to suppress it. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose my cool. "Fine," I said, my voice low and even. I stood up from the booth, determined to leave, but I didn't leave immediately. Instead, I walked outside, got into my car, and made a quick phone call. Karen didn't know it, but her blatant act of discrimination had just ignited a chain of events that would ultimately reshape the fate of her beloved diner. Sitting in my rental car, the midday sun beating down on the windshield, I took a deep breath and replayed the encounter in my head. The utter absurdity of the situation fueled my resolve. I wasn't just some random tourist passing through, someone to be dismissed and ridiculed. I was Jalen Carter, and I worked in property development. More importantly, I was scouting the area for potential redevelopment opportunities. The diner, with its prime location just off the highway, was sitting on land that was ideally suited for a modern commercial development. In fact, it was a critical piece of the puzzle, the linchpin that would unlock the potential of the entire area. What Karen didn't realize was that I had recently been promoted to lead site acquisition for my firm, giving me the authority to make strategic decisions about which properties to pursue. We had already made discreet inquiries about the adjacent lots, and the diner was next on our list. The plan was to approach the owner with a generous offer, one that would be difficult to refuse. But now, after my experience with Karen, my motivation had shifted. It was no longer just about business. It was personal. Her arrogance, her blatant discrimination, had lit a fire within me, a burning desire to see her held accountable for her actions. I started by calling my assistant back in the city, tasking her with digging up as much information as possible about the diner and its ownership. While I waited, I drove back to my hotel, a modest but clean establishment a few miles down the road. I needed a quiet space to collect my thoughts and formulate a strategy. As soon as I arrived, I fired up my laptop and began conducting my own research, scouring public records and online databases for any relevant information about the diner. The initial results were promising. The diner's official business license was up to date, but a deeper dive revealed a series of past violations, including health code infractions and zoning discrepancies. But the real goldmine was the information I uncovered about the diner's ownership structure. It turned out that Karen wasn't the owner, as she had implied. She was merely the manager, overseeing the day-to-day operations on behalf of her uncle, a man named Walter who lived out of state. Walter, as it turned out, had a less than stellar reputation. He had a history of dodging property taxes, neglecting building maintenance, and generally ignoring his civic responsibilities. Numerous citations had been issued over the years, but he had consistently managed to avoid paying the fines or addressing the underlying issues. The more I dug, the more I realized that Walter's ownership was a ticking time bomb, a precarious situation that was ripe for exploitation. With my assistant's help, I compiled a comprehensive dossier of Walter's transgressions, the unpaid taxes, the code violations, the zoning infractions. I had collected enough information to bring the entire operation crashing down. It was a risky move, one that could potentially backfire, but I was convinced that it was the right course of action. Karen's behavior was unacceptable, and her uncle's negligence was equally reprehensible. It was time for a change, time for a fresh start. The diner and the land it occupied had the potential to be something truly special, a vibrant hub that would benefit the entire community. But first, it needed to be freed from the clutches of its current custodians. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I worked tirelessly, coordinating with my team, consulting with legal experts, and navigating the complex web of local regulations. I needed to ensure that every step of the process was meticulously planned and executed, with precision. The goal was to acquire the diner property quickly and efficiently, without raising any red flags or alerting Karen and her uncle to our intentions. The first step was to approach Walter directly. We crafted a generous offer, one that was significantly above market value, but still within a reasonable range given the property's potential. The offer was structured in a way that would incentivize Walter to accept it immediately, providing him with a substantial upfront payment and a guarantee of future compensation. Simultaneously, I began working with city officials to expedite the necessary permits and approvals for the redevelopment project. I knew that time was of the essence, and I didn't want to give Walter any opportunity to reconsider his decision. With the wheels in motion, I decided to return to the town, not to confront Karen directly, but to lay the groundwork for the next phase of the plan. I met with a local commercial real estate representative, a seasoned professional who had deep ties to the community. I explained my intentions, emphasizing the potential benefits of the redevelopment project for the town's economy and overall quality of life. The real estate rep was initially skeptical, but after reviewing our plans and assessing the potential impact, he became a staunch advocate for our cause. He agreed to help us navigate the local bureaucracy and connect us with key stakeholders who could help us achieve our goals. As the weeks went by, the pieces began to fall into place. Walter, lured by the promise of a lucrative payout, agreed to sell the diner property to our firm. The city officials, recognizing the potential benefits of the redevelopment project, pledged their full support. The real estate rep, leveraging his local connections, helped us secure the necessary permits and approvals in record time. Finally, the day arrived when I was ready to execute the final phase of the plan. I assembled a small team, including the city official, the commercial real estate rep, and the building's actual owner, Walter, who still believed that we were there to discuss renovations. We walked back into the diner, the scene of my initial humiliation, ready to deliver the news that would forever alter the fate of the establishment. Karen, as always, was behind the counter, her face etched with a perpetual scowl. She glanced up at our group, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. I could see that she sensed something was amiss, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. The moment had come. The atmosphere inside the diner was thick with anticipation. The smell of stale coffee and greasy burgers hung heavy in the air, a stark reminder of the diner's current state. Karen watched us intently as we approached her, her eyes darting back and forth between the members of our group. I took a deep breath and began to speak, my voice calm and measured. "Karen," I said, "we're here today to discuss the future of this diner." I paused for a moment, allowing my words to sink in. "As you know, your Uncle Walter has been the owner of this property for many years. However, due to a variety of factors, he has decided to sell the property to our firm." Karen's face paled. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I continued, explaining the details of the sale and the plans for the redevelopment project. I emphasized the potential benefits for the community, including the creation of new jobs and the revitalization of the town's economy. Walter, standing beside me, nodded in agreement, his face beaming with excitement. He was eager to escape his financial burdens and embrace a life of leisure, and the sale of the diner was his ticket to freedom. Karen, however, was not convinced. She glared at me with pure hatred, her eyes blazing with fury. "You tricked him!" she screamed, her voice shrill and piercing. "You manipulated my uncle into selling his business! This is all your fault!" I tried to reason with her, explaining that the sale was a mutually beneficial agreement and that Walter had made the decision of his own free will. But she refused to listen, her mind clouded by anger and resentment. The city official stepped forward, attempting to calm her down and explain the legal ramifications of the sale. But Karen remained defiant, her voice rising in volume as she launched into a tirade of accusations and insults. Finally, I decided that it was time to end the charade. I handed Karen a letter from our legal team, informing her that her employment with the diner was terminated, effective immediately. The letter also outlined the terms of her severance package and advised her to seek legal counsel if she had any questions or concerns. Karen snatched the letter from my hand and ripped it to shreds, her face contorted with rage. "I'll get you. For this!" she screamed. "You haven't seen the last of me!" With that, she stormed out of the diner, leaving behind a scene of stunned silence. 2 days later, a notice was posted on the diner's front window. Property under new management, temporarily closed. The town buzzed with speculation about the diner's fate, but few knew the full story behind its sudden closure. Demo week arrived, transforming the familiar landscape of the small town. The diner, once a symbol of nostalgic Americana, was now surrounded by construction crews and heavy machinery. I returned to witness the demolition, not out of spite, but out of a sense of closure. As I approached the site, I spotted Karen standing outside, her face a mask of despair. She recognized me immediately and unleashed a torrent of verbal abuse, accusing me of ruining her life, of destroying her family's legacy. She ranted about how I had tricked her uncle, how I had manipulated the system to achieve my own selfish goals. I listened patiently, refusing to engage in her vitriol. I knew that her anger was rooted in her own insecurities and her inability to adapt to change. I felt a pang of sympathy for her, but I also knew that I had done the right thing. I walked past her and entered the diner, now a gutted shell of its former self. The contractor, a seasoned professional with years of experience, greeted me with a smile. I handed him the plans for the new cafe and co-working space, a modern, vibrant hub that would revitalize the town's economy and provide a welcoming space for residents and visitors alike. The contractor nodded approvingly and began to outline the timeline for the construction. As I surveyed the scene, I felt a sense of satisfaction wash over me. The diner was gone, but in its place would rise something new, something better. A place where everyone would be welcome, regardless of their background or their appearance. A place where innovation and creativity would flourish. The new cafe and co-working space opened its doors several months later to rave reviews. The space was bright and airy with comfortable seating, high-speed Wi-Fi, and a menu featuring locally sourced ingredients. The staff was friendly and attentive, always ready with a smile and a warm greeting. The cafe quickly became a popular gathering spot for the community, a place where people could connect, collaborate, and create. And Karen? The last I heard, she was boycotting the entire block, claiming that it was too woke, and that it had lost its traditional values. She had become a local pariah, shunned by her former friends and neighbors. I never saw her again, but I often thought about her and wondered if she ever realized the role she had played in her own downfall. In the end, the diner's transformation was a testament to the power of change and the importance of inclusivity. It was a reminder that even in the smallest of towns, progress is possible, and that even the most entrenched prejudices can be overcome. And it all started with a simple act of defiance, a refusal to accept discrimination, and a determination to create a better future for everyone.